Okay, welcome again. We are going to talk about exception handling now. And we're going to start with this question. So we are going to get a compiler error for this code. Take a look at it, review it, read it, try to figure out what's happening here. You can pause the video here too and take a little closer look at it. But we have we seemingly have everything that we need here, right? We're importing our java.io for the file, we're importing our java.util for the scanner. We're creating our file object, we're creating our scanner object, we're reading the file to get the next piece of text, and we're going to print that out. So it seems pretty simple, but it's not going to compile. And the reason why it's not going to compile is because of Java exception handling, and that's what we're going to be talking about in this video lecture. So the compilation error that's produced is a file not found exception. And so the bottom line with this exception is that it must be caught or declared to be thrown, okay? So it's going to call out this scanner object here, and it's going to say, you need to do something with this because we think that it could cause an error in the future, and we don't want that to happen. So Java's kind of holding our hand here a little bit, giving you a compiler error and telling you that you need to fix it. So we need to figure out, what are we going to do if the file can't be opened? Or if the file doesn't exist, or maybe the file is protected. If we don't check for those things, then without the exception, our program is going to crash. So it's going to either exit the program, return an error, or throw an exception. So exceptions are the normal error mechanism in Java. So now that you know a little bit more about object-oriented programming, we can talk about exceptions in terms of objects. An exception is an object that represents a program error, okay? And we've talked about errors already. We've talked about the different types of errors. We have 3 different types of errors, don't we? We have a compiler error, we have a logic error, and we have a runtime error. And programs with invalid logic will cause exceptions, okay? And some of those examples are dividing by 0, calling char at on a string with an out-of-range index, and also trying to read a file that does not exist. So we say that a logic error results in an exception being thrown, but we can also catch those exceptions and handle them too. And that's what we want you to do. We want you to be able to catch those exceptions and handle them. Okay. So these types of exceptions using file IO are checked exceptions. So this is an error that must be handled by your program in some way. So we must specify what our program is going to handle. And we can do that in 2 different ways. We can either declare that our program will handle the exception, or we can state that we choose not to handle the exception, but we also take on the risk of the program crashing if an exception occurs, okay? So we can throw that exception, we can use this throws keyword, throws, T-H-R-O-W-S, that's a throws clause. So we can use that to just to help us get our code compiled, essentially. But we are using the throws clause like a waiver of liability. So we are saying that to the compiler, we are saying that I hereby agree that this method might throw an exception, and I accept the consequences, which would be my program crashing if this happens, okay? So I am taking on that responsibility that my code may crash if the program can't find my file, okay? And you would put that throws exception at the end of your method header, okay? So in this case, we're using public static void main, and then at the end, after our parameters, we have throws IO exception. And so whenever we use our file IO, especially for opening files, we're going to use that throws IO exception, okay? Okay, so that was one way. We could throw the exception, and if it crashed, then it crashed. Or we can actually catch and handle the exception, which is a much better way of doing things, okay? Just a better practice. So we can try to open the file. In this case, what we're doing is we are trying to open the file. We have this file, new object, we're looking for this file, and then we're reading from the file. If it isn't able to open the file, then it's going to go down to the catch, and it's going to catch this IO exception, okay? And it's going to tell the user that it was unable to open the file that was provided, which in this case is input.txt. So it's a much nicer way of letting the user know that we can't find or we can't open the text file, and we're going to exit the program, okay? So this gives the user a little more information instead of just exiting the program and we don't know why, okay? So we want to give the user as much information as possible so that they can either fix their error, or maybe the input file was not did not have the right permissions, whatever they need to do in order to fix the error, okay? Okay, so fixing the compiler error, throwing an exception, or handling the exception both can resolve the compiler error. So remember that throwing exceptions, the user will see that program terminate with the exception, but it's not very friendly to the user. So they're not really going to see what's happening. They're just going to see the program terminate, and they'll see the error. But when we handle exceptions, then we get a better understanding of what's happening. We get that error message, and we can actually do something about that. So in our class, we're going to handle exceptions when reading and writing files in our program assignments, okay? So make sure and do that. So that concludes our exceptions and handling portion of the lecture video series. We are going to talk about output and the scanner next, and then we'll do a few examples. So hang in there, we're almost done, and I'll see you in the next lecture.